Today, we're going deep into the story of Carthage, that ancient city shrouded in mystery and intrigue. We've got a fascinating collection of sources here. Our mission, to uncover the truth about this empire, from its innovative beginnings to its dramatic downfall.
It's a story that often gets overshadowed by the Roman perspective. The victors get to write the history books, as they say. But by digging a little deeper, we can uncover a tale of resilience, ingenuity, and a civilization that left an indelible mark on the world.
I love that. Uncovering the truth. It's like we're archaeological detectives piecing together clues from the past. And to start, we need to journey back to the roots of Carthage, the Phoenicians. Now, when I think of the Phoenicians, I think of master seafarers, traders extraordinaire, navigating the Mediterranean centuries before Columbus set sail.
That's a great place to start. Imagine these independent city-states, like Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos, hugging the coastline of modern-day Lebanon. These weren't conquerors in the traditional sense, but their influence spread through their mastery of trade and navigation.
Their ships were marvels of engineering, sturdy vessels designed for long voyages and rough seas. And get this, some historians believe they might have actually circumnavigated Africa around 600 BC. That's mind-blowing. Using the stars as their guide, centuries before modern navigational tools.
The fact that the Greeks later referred to the North Star as the Phoenician star speaks volumes about their seafaring prowess. And this mastery of the sea allowed them to establish trading networks that span the Mediterranean, bringing them into contact with diverse cultures and spreading their influence far and wide.
And speaking of influence, we can't forget their famous purple dye. I mean, talk about a status symbol extracted from these tiny murex sea snails. It was so rare and valuable that it became associated with royalty and power.
The color purple, Tyrian purple, imperial purple became synonymous with luxury and prestige, a testament to the Phoenicians' ingenuity and their ability to transform a humble sea creature into a highly sought-after commodity. But perhaps their most enduring legacy was their revolutionary alphabet.
Okay, yes, the alphabet. It's easy to take it for granted, but can you imagine a world without it?
Think about it. This elegant system of 22 symbols, easy to learn and adapt, became the foundation for the Greek alphabet, which in turn influenced all Western alphabets we use today.
Talk about a ripple effect. It's amazing how something developed so long ago can still be so fundamental to our world today. So how did the Phoenicians and their innovations connect to the story of Carthage?
Well, legend has it that Carthage was founded by a Phoenician princess named Alyssa, who fled her home city of Tyre with a band of followers. The story goes that she landed on the coast of North Africa and through some clever negotiations secured a plot of land from the local ruler.
Ah, yes, the classic oxhide trick. She cut an oxhide into thin strips and used them to encircle a surprisingly large area, much more land than the king had anticipated giving away.
And on that land, strategically located on a hill overlooking a natural harbor, rose the city of Carthage. The location was truly ideal, a natural fortress protected by the sea, with fertile land surrounding it, fed by the Majerta River.
And they weren't just farmers and fishermen. Their diet was surprisingly diverse. Imagine dates, figs, seafood, and grains, a testament to their agricultural skills and their trade connections.
And fueled by this abundant land and their strategic location, Carthage quickly flourished, growing into a powerful city-state with a complex republican government, complete with a senate, elected officials, and a system of checks and balances.
Sounds a bit like ancient Rome, wouldn't you say? Both republics, both vying for power. But I'm curious, how did their approaches to military power differ?
That's where we see a key distinction. Rome, at its core, relied on citizen soldiers, men fighting for their homeland. Carthage, on the other hand, built its military strength through alliances and a network of mercenaries.
So their army was like a mosaic, made up of soldiers from different regions and cultures, each bringing their unique skills to the battlefield.
Exactly. Imagine Numidian cavalry, renowned for their speed and agility. Balearic slingers, deadly accurate with their projectiles, and even Greek hoplites, masters of close-quarters combat, all fighting under the Carthaginian banner.
That's incredible. But wouldn't that create some, well, communication challenges, to say the least? Trying to coordinate troops speaking dozens of languages.
You're spot on. Managing such a diverse force would have been a logistical feat, and this reliance on mercenaries, while initially effective for expanding their territory, would later prove to be one of Carthage's vulnerabilities.
Interesting. So their strength was also a potential weakness. So Carthage is thriving, expanding its influence. But I have a feeling trouble is brewing. Isn't this about the time they start bumping into another rising power, the Mediterranean, the Greeks?
You're right. As Carthage expanded, it inevitably came into contact and conflict with the Greek colonies that had spread across the Mediterranean, particularly in Sicily.
Ah, Sicily, that strategically vital island. A crossroads of trade and culture. It's no wonder it became a battleground.
Control of Sicily meant control of key trade routes and access to resources like grain and timber, resources that both Carthage and the Greeks desperately needed. And this clash of civilizations led to centuries of conflict, with alliances shifting and fortunes changing with each battle.
This sounds like a real Game of Thrones, with these two powers battling for supremacy. Were there any particular events or figures that stand out from this period?
One episode that really captures the intensity of this rivalry is the story of Agathocles, the tyrant of Syracuse. Now imagine this. Agathocles, facing defeat in Sicily, decides to pull off one of the most audacious moves in military history.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What did he do?
He evacuated his troops from Syracuse, set sail across the Mediterranean, and launched a surprise attack on Carthage itself.
Wow, that's bold. Did he actually manage to pull that off?
He did. Agathocles landed on the African coast, and to the shock of the Carthaginians, managed to inflict several defeats on their forces. For a time, he actually threatened the very heart of their empire.
So he turned the tables, bringing the fight right to their doorstep. That must have been a wake-up call for Carthage, a sign that they weren't invincible.
It was. Although his campaign ultimately failed, and Agathocles was forced to retreat back to Sicily. His daring raid exposed a vulnerability in Carthage's defenses and highlighted the potential unreliability of mercenary armies.
It's fascinating how a single audacious act can shift the balance of power, exposing weaknesses and revealing unforeseen possibilities. And I have a feeling another power was taking notes, watching these events unfold with great interest, a young republic in Italy called Rome.
You're exactly right. Rome at this point was steadily consolidating its power in Italy, developing a unique system of governance and military strength.
They had this intriguing approach to citizenship, didn't they? Conquered people weren't just subjugated, they were often incorporated into the Roman state, granted rights and a path to citizenship.
It was a pragmatic approach that helped fuel their expansion. By offering a stake in the system, they fostered a sense of loyalty and broadened their base of manpower and resources.
Clever. It's not just about brute force, it's about strategic integration. So how did Rome and Carthage view each other at this early stage? Were they openly hostile? Or was there a more cautious dance between these rising powers?
Initially, it was a relationship marked by a cautious sort of friendship. They signed treaties recognizing each other's spheres of influence and even engaged in some trade. But beneath the surface, there was a growing sense of rivalry, a recognition that these two ambitious powers might eventually clash.
That makes sense. Like two magnets with the same polarity, they can coexist for a while, but eventually they're going to repel each other. And I'm guessing there were some external factors, other players on the board, that further complicated their relationship.
You're absolutely right. And one figure who really shook things up was Pyrrhus of Epirus, a Greek king with ambitions that rivaled those of Alexander the Great.
Pyrrhus. Wasn't he busy trying to conquer Greece? How did he get entangled with Rome and Carthage?
He was a man of boundless ambition. His campaigns in Italy brought him into conflict with Rome, and his involvement in Sicily pitted him against Carthage. It was a chaotic time, with alliances shifting and multiple powers vying for control.
So Pyrrhus became a common enemy, unintentionally uniting Rome and Carthage against a shared threat.
In a way, yes. His campaigns, though ultimately unsuccessful, exposed the vulnerabilities of both powers and created a power vacuum in Sicily, which both sides were eager to fill.
And a power vacuum rarely stays empty for long. I have a feeling this is setting the stage for a major showdown between Rome and Carthage, the clash that would become known as the Punic Wars.
You're right on the mark. The stage is set, the pieces are in place, and the first move is about to be made.
It's like watching a pot simmering on the stove, you know? You know it's going to boil over eventually, but the anticipation just keeps building.
A perfect analogy, and what ultimately caused that boil over was a combination of ambition, resentment, and a series of events that pushed these two empires onto a collision course. Remember Hamilcar Barca, the Carthaginian general who had been sent to Spain after the Mercenary War?
Oh yes, the man with the score to settle. I'm guessing his time in Spain wasn't about relaxing and enjoying the Iberian sunshine.
Not exactly. Hamilcar, fueled by his hatred of Rome and his desire to restore Carthage to its former glory, saw Spain as a land of opportunity. It was rich in resources, particularly silver, and its fierce Celtic tribes provided ample opportunities to train and harden his army.
So he was essentially building a power base, a springboard for a future confrontation with Rome.
Precisely, and he instilled this burning desire for revenge in his sons, particularly his eldest son, Hannibal, who would later become a legend and a nightmare for Rome.
Hannibal. Now there's a name that echoes through history. Growing up in the shadow of his father's ambition and resentment, he must have been quite a force to be reckoned with.
He was. Imagine young Hannibal, accompanying his father on campaigns, witnessing the brutal realities of war, and absorbing his father's deep-seated hatred of Rome. There's even a story that Hamilcar made Hannibal swear an oath of eternal enmity towards Rome when he was just a boy.
Wow, that's intense. Talk about a heavy burden to carry. A childhood vow to avenge your city's defeat.
It's a story that highlights the deep-seated animosity between these two civilizations, a rivalry that was passed down through generations. And as Hannibal grew older, he proved to be a brilliant strategist and a charismatic leader, inheriting his father's military genius and his unwavering determination to challenge Roman power.
So Hamilcar is grooming Hannibal to be his successor, the leader who will finally bring Rome to its knees.
He was. But fate had other plans. Hamilcar Barca died in battle in Spain when Hannibal was still a young man. However, his legacy lived on in his sons, especially in Hannibal, who stepped into his father's shoes and continued his work in Spain.
And he clearly wasn't content to just sit back and manage the status quo. What were some of his early moves in Spain?
Hannibal, at the young age of 26, became the commander of the Carthaginian forces in Spain, leading them to a series of impressive victories against the local tribes. He was consolidating Carthaginian control, expanding their territory, and amassing wealth from the silver mines, all while keeping a wary eye on Rome.
Rome must have been watching these developments with growing concern. A young, ambitious general driven by a thirst for revenge, building a powerful army right on their doorstep. That couldn't have sat well with them.
They were definitely concerned. They tried to contain Carthaginian expansion through diplomacy, forging alliances with some of the Iberian tribes who were wary of Carthaginian power.
But diplomacy, as we all know, has its limits, especially when you're dealing with someone like Hannibal. I'm sensing that a clash was practically unavoidable.
You're right. And the flashpoint that ignited the Second Punic War was a seemingly minor incident involving the city of Saguntum.
Saguntum. Tell us about this city and why it became the catalyst for war.
Saguntum was a Greek city located on the eastern coast of Spain. And crucially, it was allied with Rome. It was essentially a Roman protectorate, a strategic outpost within territory claimed by Carthage.
So it was a bit like a tripwire, a test of Rome's resolve,
Yeah.
and a potential casus belli for a conflict that had been brewing for years.
Exactly. And Hannibal, ever the strategist, saw an opportunity. In 219 BC, he laid siege to Saguntum, a direct challenge to Rome, and a calculated provocation designed to test their willingness to go to war.
And how did Rome react to this challenge?
They were furious. They saw the siege of Saguntum as a violation of their treaty and demanded that Carthage disavow Hannibal's actions and hand him over for punishment.
But I'm guessing Hannibal wasn't the type to back down, especially with the fate of his city and his family's legacy on the line.
You're right. He had the support of a faction in Carthage that was eager for war with Rome, a chance to reclaim their lost glory and avenge their previous defeat. And so Carthage, rather than appeasing Rome, chose to back their most successful general.
So the die was cast, the Second Punic War had begun, and Hannibal, rather than waiting for the Romans to come to him, decided to launch a preemptive strike, a move so audacious that it would shock the world and etch his name into the annals of military history.
His plan was nothing short of brilliant and utterly insane. He would lead his army, a diverse force of Carthaginians, Africans, Iberians, and Gauls across the Pyrenees Mountains, through Gaul and over the Alps, into the heart of Italy.
Wait, over the Alps? Those mountains are incredibly treacherous. Even today with modern equipment, how on earth did he plan to get an entire army, including war elephants, across those icy peaks?
It seemed impossible, a logistical nightmare that many, even within Carthage, thought was doomed to fail. But Hannibal was determined. He saw the Alps, not as an obstacle, but as an opportunity to catch the Romans off guard, to strike a blow at their heartland before they even knew what hit them.
It was a gamble, a high-stakes move that could have ended in disaster. But it also speaks to Hannibal's genius, his ability to think outside the box, and to see possibilities where others saw only insurmountable barriers.
And so in the spring of 218 BC, Hannibal set off on his epic journey. Imagine this: an army of tens of thousands of men, along with horses, mules, supplies, and those incredible war elephants, all making their way through narrow mountain passes, often choked with snow and
It
ice.
must have been an incredible sight, these massive creatures lumbering through the snow, their tusks glinting in the sun. But I can't imagine it was an easy journey.
It was brutal. They faced attacks from hostile tribes, treacherous paths, food shortages, and the constant threat of exposure to the elements. Many men and animals perished during the crossing, succumbing to the harsh conditions or falling victim to ambushes.
It's a testament to the resilience and determination of both the men and those elephants that any of them made it through, and those that did. Must have presented a terrifying sight as they finally emerged from the Alps onto the Italian plains.
You can only imagine the shock and disbelief of the Romans when they realized that Hannibal, whom they had expected to attack by sea, had somehow appeared in the heart of their territory, ready to unleash havoc.
It was a masterstroke of strategy, a move that caught Rome completely off guard and shifted the balance of power in an instant. So Hannibal's in Italy, he's got his army, he's ready to take on Rome. What's his next move?
He wasted no time in pressing his advantage. He quickly marched south, engaging the Roman legions in a series of battles that would shock the Roman world and demonstrate his brilliance as a military commander.
These were the battles that would cement Hannibal's place in the pantheon of military geniuses. Battles like Trebia, Trasimene, and of course the epic clash at Cannae. Each of these battles showcased his tactical brilliance, his ability to outmaneuver and outwit his opponents, even when facing superior numbers.
At Trebia, he lured the Romans into an ambush, using the terrain and the freezing river to his advantage, inflicting heavy casualties, and sending a clear message: Hannibal was a force to be reckoned with.
And at Lake Trasimene, he once again used the terrain to his advantage, ambushing the Romans in a narrow valley. Shrouded in fog, it was a devastating defeat for Rome, and their losses were mounting. But it was the Battle of Cannae that would truly shock the Roman world and demonstrate Hannibal's tactical genius on a grand scale.
Cannae was a masterpiece of military strategy, a battle that has been studied and admired for centuries. Hannibal, despite being outnumbered, completely encircled the Roman army, trapping tens of thousands of legionaries, and inflicting one of the most devastating defeats in Roman history.
It was a massacre, a testament to Hannibal's brilliance and the courage and discipline of his troops. But how did Rome as a republic survive a defeat of this magnitude? Losing so many men, so many experienced commanders. That must have been a devastating blow.
It was, but it also revealed the incredible resilience and determination of the Roman people. Despite suffering catastrophic losses, they refused to surrender. They rallied, reorganized their armies, and adopted a new strategy, one that would focus on attrition, on wearing down Hannibal's forces, and preventing him from achieving a decisive victory.
So instead of engaging Hannibal in open battles, which had proven disastrous, they shifted to a more defensive war of attrition, avoiding direct confrontations, and focusing on harassing his supply lines
Yeah,
and retaking lost territories.
exactly. They realized they couldn't beat Hannibal on his terms, so they changed the terms of the game, playing to their strengths and exploiting his weaknesses. It was a long and grueling process, but it gradually began to turn the tide of the war.
Hannibal must have been incredibly frustrated. He's in the heart of Italy, having inflicted these crushing defeats on Rome, yet he can't seem to land a knockout blow.
He was in a precarious position. He had won the battles, but he was slowly losing the war. His supply lines were stretched thin. He was far from home, and his hopes that Rome's allies would defect and join his cause never materialized.
And Rome, meanwhile, wasn't just sitting back and waiting for Hannibal to tire himself out. They were making strategic moves elsewhere. Right.
Absolutely. They realized that to defeat Hannibal, they needed to cut off his sources of support. And so they sent an army to Spain under the command of a brilliant young general named Scipio, the same Scipio who would later lead the final assault on Carthage.
Scipio Africanus, the man who became Hannibal's nemesis, the architect of Rome's final victory. What did Scipio accomplish in Spain?
He proved to be a worthy adversary for Hannibal. He studied Hannibal's tactics, adopted many of them himself, and through a combination of military skill and shrewd diplomacy, he gradually gained the upper hand in Spain. He won over local tribes, secured vital supply lines, and eventually drove the Carthaginians out of Spain.
Losing Spain must have been a major setback for Hannibal. It wasn't just a loss of territory. It meant losing a vital source of manpower. And even more importantly, the silver mines that had been funding his campaigns.
It was a turning point in the war. With Spain lost, Hannibal was isolated in Italy. His army increasingly depleted, his hopes of reinforcement dwindling, and his grip on his hard-won victories slipping away. And Scipio, emboldened by his success in Spain, was about to make a bold move that would shift the war to Carthage's doorstep.
Ooh, this is getting good. What was his plan?
He convinced the Roman Senate to allow him to invade North Africa, to strike at the heart of Carthage, and force Hannibal to return home to defend his city. It was a risky move, but it was also a brilliant strategic gamble.
So Scipio is taking a page out of Hannibal's playbook, turning the tables, and forcing him to fight a defensive war on his own soil. That's incredible. How did Hannibal respond?
He had no choice but to return. After 15 long years campaigning in Italy, Hannibal was recalled to Carthage to face this new threat.
It's like a game of chess, with these two masterminds moving their pieces across the board, anticipating each other's moves, and setting the stage for a climactic showdown.
A perfect analogy. And the stage for that showdown was set in 22 BC, near the town of Zama, in what is now Tunisia. The Battle of Zama would be the final confrontation between these two titans of military strategy, a battle that would determine the fate of both Rome and Carthage.
This is the clash of the titans,
Yeah.
the moment we've all been waiting for. The two greatest military commanders of the age, finally facing off on the battlefield. It must have been an epic encounter.
It was. At Zama, Hannibal's experience and tactical brilliance were pitted against Scipio's strategic vision and his ability to adapt and learn from his opponent.
And in the end, Scipio outmaneuvered Hannibal.
He did. Scipio had learned from Hannibal's tactics. He countered Hannibal's use of elephants, disrupted his formations, and crucially, he had the support of the Numidian cavalry, the same cavalry that had once been Carthage's strongest ally.
Oh, wow. That must have been a bitter pill to swallow for Hannibal. The betrayal of Massinissa and his Numidian horsemen, siding with Rome at the crucial moment.
It was a turning point in the battle. With the Numidian cavalry on his side, Scipio was able to outflank Hannibal, encircle his forces, and ultimately secure a decisive victory for Rome.
So Zama was the final nail in the coffin for Carthage. What happened to Hannibal after this defeat?
He escaped the battlefield and returned to Carthage, urging the Carthaginian Senate to accept defeat and negotiate peace terms with Rome.
And those terms, I'm
Wow.
guessing, were not going to be favorable to Carthage. What were the consequences of this defeat?
The Second Punic War ended with a treaty that was truly humiliating for Carthage. They lost their remaining overseas possessions, were forced to pay a massive indemnity, and were forbidden from waging war without Roman consent.
So Carthage, once a mighty empire rivaling Rome, was now essentially a client state, stripped of its power and its pride. And what became of Hannibal? Did he just fade into obscurity after this defeat?
He remained a respected figure in Carthage, serving in the government and working to rebuild the city's shattered economy. But his defeat at Zama and the humiliation of Carthage fueled his desire to one day challenge Rome again.
But Rome, having been brought to the brink of destruction by this man, was surely watching his every move, waiting for any excuse to eliminate him.
They were, and when rumors reached Rome that Hannibal was plotting with the Seleucid Empire in the east, they demanded his extradition.
So Hannibal, facing arrest and likely execution, was forced to flee his homeland, becoming a man without a country, a fugitive on the run from the most powerful empire in the world.
He spent years wandering the eastern Mediterranean, offering his services as a military advisor to various rulers, always hoping to find a way to strike back at Rome. He eventually died in Bithynia, on the shores of the Black Sea, still defiant of Rome to the very end.
What a dramatic and bittersweet end for such a remarkable figure. A man who had challenged the might of Rome, brought them to their knees, and yet ultimately was unable to escape their grasp.
Hannibal's story is a reminder that even the most brilliant individuals can be caught in the currents of history, that even the most cunning plans can be undone by fate. But despite his defeat, his legacy lives on, inspiring military strategists and captivating historians to this day.
It's a story that could fill volumes, a testament to the enduring power of human ambition, resilience, and the complexities of war and peace. But the story of Carthage isn't over yet, is it? There's still one more chapter to this epic saga, a chapter that will see the city's final destruction and the tragic end of its people.
You're right, the embers of resentment still smoldered in Carthage and Rome, ever vigilant, watched for any sign of a resurgence. The stage is set for the final act, a confrontation that will seal the fate of Carthage forever. It's a story that in many ways is even more tragic than the previous wars. This wasn't a clash of titans, a battle for supremacy. It was a slow, agonizing death sentence for a city that was already on its knees.
After the Second Punic War, Carthage was essentially a shadow of its former self, stripped of its power, and forced to pay a heavy price for daring to challenge Rome. But even in defeat, the spirit of Carthage endured, didn't it?
It did. They focused on rebuilding their economy, maintaining their internal affairs, and adhering to the strict terms imposed by Rome. But they were constantly under the watchful eye of their former enemy, their every move scrutinized, their every success viewed with suspicion.
And there was one figure in Rome who embodied this distrust, this simmering animosity towards Carthage, Cato the Elder, the senator who famously declared, "Carthage must be destroyed." It's a phrase that has echoed through history, a chilling reminder of the enduring power of hatred and the dangers of unchecked ambition.
Cato was a powerful voice in the Roman Senate, a man who had witnessed the devastation caused by Hannibal's invasion of Italy. He saw Carthage as a constant threat, a poisonous vine that needed to be uprooted before it could strangle Rome.
But what was the immediate trigger? The event that finally pushed Rome to declare war for the third time.
It was a series of border disputes between Carthage and its neighbor Numidia, ruled by King Massinissa. Remember him? The one who switched sides at the Battle of Zama, siding with Rome.
Oh yes, the ultimate betrayal. And I'm guessing he wasn't exactly a benevolent neighbor to Carthage after the Second Punic War.
He wasn't. Massinissa, emboldened by Roman support, saw an opportunity to expand his own territory at Carthage's expense. He began chipping away at their borders, seizing valuable farmland, and provoking skirmishes with Carthaginian forces.
So Carthage is in a no-win situation. They can't fight back without risking the wrath of Rome. But they can't just stand by and watch their territory be taken. It's a classic catch-22.
It was. They appealed to Rome for arbitration, hoping that their former enemy would intervene and restrain Massinissa. But Rome, influenced by Cato and those who saw an opportunity to finally eliminate their rival, was in no mood to help.
Cato must have seen this as the perfect opportunity to achieve his ultimate goal, the destruction of Carthage.
He did. He used his influence in the Senate to push for war, arguing that Carthage, even without a powerful army, was a threat that needed to be dealt with once and for all. His constant refrain in the Senate, no matter the topic, was, "Carthage must be destroyed." Eventually, his persistence paid off.
But this seems like such an unnecessary war. Carthage at this point was practically defenseless. They had no real army. Their navy was reduced to a handful of ships. They posed no real threat to Rome. Why go to all this trouble to destroy a city that was already defeated?
It was, as many historians argue, a war driven by fear, by paranoia, by the ambition of men like Massinissa and the implacable hatred of Cato. It was a war that could have been avoided, a war that ultimately serves as a tragic reminder of the human capacity for violence and destruction.
And so the Third Punic War begins. With a Roman army led by the consul Scipio Aemilianus, the grandson of the Scipio who defeated Hannibal, laying siege to Carthage.
Exactly, and the siege of Carthage was a brutal and protracted affair, lasting for 3 long years. The Carthaginians, though outmatched, fought with incredible courage and determination.
3 years. Carthage must have had some impressive defenses to hold out for so long against the Roman legions.
They did. Their walls were high and strong, their harbor well defended. But the real strength of Carthage lay in the spirit of its people. Men, women, and even children joined the fight, working day and night to repair damaged walls, make weapons, and repel Roman attacks. They even melted down statues and ornaments to make weapons and ammunition, showing their unwavering commitment to defending their home.
It's a story of incredible resilience, a testament to the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds.
It is, but sadly, courage and determination alone weren't enough. In 146 BC, after a final desperate assault, Roman legions breached the walls of Carthage and poured into the city.
The fall of Carthage, one of the most infamous events in ancient history, a tale of destruction and brutality that has resonated through the ages. What happened during those final days?
It was a scene of unimaginable horror. The Romans, fueled by years of propaganda and fueled by a desire for revenge, unleashed a wave of violence upon the city. They slaughtered men, women, and children, looted temples and homes, and set fire to buildings, turning the once proud city into a smoldering ruin.
It's a chilling reminder of the dark side of human nature, the capacity for violence and destruction that can erupt even in the aftermath of victory.
It is. And the destruction of Carthage wasn't just about military conquest. It was about sending a message, a brutal reminder to the world that Rome would tolerate no rivals, no challenges to its authority.
They salted the earth, didn't they? A symbolic act to ensure that nothing would ever grow there again.
Yes. It was a gesture intended to erase Carthage from memory, to obliterate its culture, and to serve as a warning. to any who might dare to challenge the power of Rome. And for centuries, the story of Carthage was told from the Roman perspective, a tale of a cruel and treacherous empire, a necessary enemy that had to be destroyed.
But as we've seen, there's much more to the story of Carthage than just the Roman narrative. It's a story of innovation, of resilience,
Yeah.
of a civilization that left an indelible mark on the world.
It's important to remember that much of what we know about Carthage comes from their rivals, the victors who got to shape the narrative. But even through the lens of Roman accounts, we can glimpse the ingenuity of their engineers, the skill of their navigators, and the impact of their cultural innovations.
They gave us the alphabet. They pioneered trade routes. They built a thriving empire. And while their story might have ended in tragedy, their legacy continues to inspire and intrigue us centuries later.
And their story serves as a reminder that even the most powerful empires are vulnerable, that success can breed complacency, and that the seeds of destruction can often be found within.
Carthage might be gone, but the echoes of its existence resonate through history, reminding us of the complexities of civilization, the ebb and flow of power, and the enduring power of human ingenuity and human folly.
So as you navigate your own journeys, remember to embrace curiosity, to challenge assumptions, and to seek out multiple perspectives.
And as always, we encourage you to delve deeper into the stories that intrigue you. Be sure to like and subscribe. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, happy exploring.